Hey, Nikki.
Hey, Selena.
And hey, y'all, and welcome to the Season 7 Julia episode. The very last character episode for the season and the series. How do you feel about that, Nikki?
Oh, boy. I have lots of emotions. When you say it like that, I'm like, oh, man, it's high pressure. For one, it's our last ever. But for two, man, it's kind of emotional.
It's a little bittersweet, as they say. So,
how do you feel about it?
I'm going to tell you after we get through Women at the House.
Okay.
So,
are you compartmentalizing your emotions till then?
I think so, because we just have more to do, you know?
We do.
I'll probably collapse at the end in a cheerful way.
In a happy way.
Yes. As my head hits the floor, it will be with love. Remember.
And joy.
Yes. Well, we can sum up our feelings. Don't worry, y'all. We'll get in our feelings.
It's coming.
But today we have to talk about Julia. You know, this is a very important time. Help me.
Sometimes if I just stay quiet, watching you backpedal through something is worth the price of admission. Yes, we get to talk about Julia. It is our sweet tea and TV obligation, in fact. But we would do it even if we weren't obligated.
Yes. Okay. That's kind of nice.
Okay. So, Selena, which episodes were Julia focused? What if this was me turning it on you and making you run through them real quick?
I will be ready if you need me to.
Probably, that's true.
You want to switch roles?
No, because I'm prepared for this one. Okay. So we had a few episodes this season that were primarily focused on Julia, and then she was an important component of a few others. So episode 1 of Human Bondage, OBS. This is the one where we learned that Allison left Sugarbaker's high and dry and broke. Enter BJ Poteet. Beyond obviously being a partner in Sugarbaker's and being related to the plot line in that way, she also goes on to lose her share, Julia that is, goes on to lose her share in Sugarbaker's in a drunken poker game against BJ. Episode 3, Mary Jo versus the Terminator. So Julia is the Terminator here. She goes to town editing a letter. I use the word editing in quotes. Editing a letter Mary Jo has written the school board about them trying to cut the AIDS prevention program she helped stand up a few years ago. And Mary Jo has thoughts, and that takes up a lot of the episode. Then we have episode 4, On the Road Again. In this one, Mary Jo sets herself, Bernice, and Julia up on a Thelma and Louise-style road trip. Julia's part is that her new boyfriend is attending a conference in Nashville, so she wants to be part of the trip to go visit him for the weekend. Then we have episode 5, Screaming Passages. We get a continuation of the boyfriend storyline in this one, but this time it's part of Julia's journey into the change. She has to break it to Philip that she's a woman of a certain age in this episode. Then we have episode 15, Nude Julia, New York Morning. Julia takes the crew to an art exhibit opening featuring the work of a college professor of hers, and much to everyone's surprise, they recognize a very familiar face in one of his paintings. Everything else they see may not be quite so familiar. Episode 19, The Woman Who Came to Sugarbaker's. In this one, Julia's old school headmistress comes to stay at Sugarbaker's after being instructed to by her dead husband in a seance, which I'm going to level with you, I forgot about until I was putting together my summary and like poking around in some things. And I was like, oh, it was a seance where he told her to come, which is why they do the seance at the end.
Oh, yeah, that's
about
fair.
That.
Well, there's good scenes in that one, and then there's the rest of the episode.
Then there's the rest of the episode. Maybe we'll get into that.
Maybe.
So then briefly, her major plot, or were there any episodes I missed?
No, you got it.
Okay. And then her major plot points. So we learned that her very brief relationship with Dr. Hacker ended really abruptly just a few minutes into episode 1 on her birthday, which feels criminal to me. Yeah. But worry not, Selena. I see the worry on your face. Worry not. She falls in love again quickly with Philip, a heartthrob and a composer.
Or Miranda Priestley's husband, depending on how you feel about it.
That's how I would have described him, too. I keep forgetting that.
That's okay. I'm here to remind you.
As per usual with designing women, Julia also finds herself on the brink of losing the business. But again, worry not. She quickly gains a new partner in BJ. She, I just mentioned this, confronts the greatest metamorphosis a woman can make. No, not becoming a woman. No, not with child. No, not childbirth. The other one. The one where you get hot flashes and grow facial hair. That's right. Menopause. The change. The change. The only big change. As I was putting that list together, I was like, man, being a woman is hard.
It's a good time, you know?
Then she confronts her art teacher who took advantage of her both when she was young and then again in this episode where she finds out he painted a naked picture of her. And then she offers her home up as a safe haven for her former school headmistress. Did I miss any major plot points, Selena?
No, the only thing I wanted to say the whole time was, Thelma and Louise, you say?
Selena's lobbying for that to be our end of season episode, that special episode we watch.
I also said fried green tomatoes, and I am also open to suggestions. So
She's flexible, guys.
that's what Nikki's always saying.
As long as it's something she suggested. She's flexible.
You can go with any one of her options.
So we're calling our Julia season 7 adventures Julia Sugarbaker, Nude, Shrewd, All Attitude.
With that in mind, would you like to get into some character superlatives?
I would. This will be fun.
Perfect. So, as has become our process, we want to talk about first our best and worst episodes. When you think of the Terminator, Nikki, and when you think of the Terminator in her final season, what was your best episode?
Well, when you put it that way, my best episode was the opposite of the Terminator. So it was the parts of Julia that I really love. And it wasn't one of the episodes we called out at the top of our show, but it was episode 14, The Wedding Redux. And I think it's because when I think about the universe of Julia episodes this season, this is the one where we really get to see her as a real friend. So she wanted to do something nice for Anthony and Etienne, something unselfish and without any ulterior motive or motivation. She really just wanted them to get a chance to have a separate ceremony with their families. So she killed herself to make this thing happen. She had everything working against her, but she held it all together until the bitter end when she finally lost it and everything fell apart. But ultimately, Anthony and Etienne ended up with a really special moment, and it was all because Julia was trying to be a really good friend. And I feel like when I look back on the series of Designing Women, I want to remember them as this cast of people who came together to tell a story about coworkers and friends. I don't really want to remember the infighting. I don't really want to remember the negative pieces. And this episode was kind of the nicest example we had for Julia this season. So that was my favorite.
I like that, Zag, and I appreciate it. And I think that is a nice balance to what has felt a little tense over the course of the season.
Yeah.
My best episode was episode 15, Nude, Julia, New York Morning. In general, I just thought this one was really funny. Interestingly, not necessarily Julia that was funny, but definitely there were a ton of funny moments for me, and many that I've talked about over the course of the season. So I won't live in them, but just as a reminder, Bernice's turn as a nude model painted by old people with cataracts. We get that story. BJ and Anthony trying to buy back the painting was absolutely delightful. I will not soon detangle the idea of Monday Night Football and a good nude painting. That's going in my Monday Night Football routine this year. You're welcome, Casey. And then Carlene attempting to hide Julia's naked body in the painting with strategically placed decals, only to be bested by Julia running over there as well and covering up every tid and bit, if you will.
I will.
You will, of course. For Julia specifically, I liked seeing something knock her off balance, in this case, Nigel, not because I thought what he did was fair or right. Obviously, it wasn't. But because we also get to see her snap out of it, snap on him, and get back a painting he never should have had in the first place. And I do think that's really important because sometimes we've talked about Julia's tirades not necessarily being earned, or even though they're good and she and Dixie Carter is a great performer, sometimes you're like, whoa. And in this case, it was more than warranted. The painting is really her power, and she's taking that power back. And as the audience, we're introduced to an interesting conflict with a resolution that feels earned. You know how I'm about pace, so that was there. 22 minutes of space used well is really about all I could ask for. So, what about your worst episode?
So I went back to my notes that I was keeping in real time as I was watching this season through. And for episode 3, Mary Jo versus the Terminator, I had written, "This is Julia's worst episode ever." But again, it was real time. So as I continued watching through the season, it was bested or worsted, as it were, by another one of the episodes we didn't call out at the top of the show, but it was episode 17, Shovel Off to Buffalo, which I think you called as your worst Mary Jo episode, right? Yeah. So I think we'll get into it a little bit when we get into like cringiest or most obnoxious moments. But this one was just a really bad look for Julia as someone who was supposed to be one of Mary Jo's besties. She was just such a horrible friend in this episode. She was unsupportive, and, you know, we just can't support an unsupportive jerk. So that was her worst.
That's fair. You really zagged on this category.
I just went all over the place. You know what? I figured it's the end of the season, end of the series. Let's just do what we want, man.
Yeah.
Let's just do it. I added a whole nother category, which I'll tell you about in a minute when you finish your worst. Yeah.
Well, that's very exciting.
I'm just doing whatever I want, Selena. I don't care anymore.
As long as there's not a test, I'm very excited. So it's interesting that you started and made me think you were going to go with episode 3, Mary Jo versus the Terminator. That was my worst episode for Julia. Although I'm really definitely in line with you. I mean, the shovel off to Buffalo. I don't know, but we've talked about this.
It was the hand to the palm that you hated the most. The palm to the head. I mean,
right? You just don't do it. I've thought about that so many times.
I think about it too. I imagine doing it to your head just to see your reaction.
I can't be responsible for what I do after a face palming, you know? So for Mary Jo versus the Terminator, it's the recycled plots, for starters. You know, we're returning to the fashion show where Julia mooned the audience, and then also Mary Jo fights for the HIV/AIDS education in Claudia's school. Like, it just feels like it was episode 3 and we were already out of things. Really? And this is
with a new character. We had a whole new character and still ran out of things.
It's crazy. So, you know, this is the first of several episodes. We've talked about this all season. We've already talked about it today. But it is the first time we see Julia and Mary Jo fight. And so that starts a runner that just didn't work for either one of us. So I just didn't think this was a good look for Julia. And I want to be very clear. I love the character of Julia. However, and I know fans do too, when she's condescending, she's super condescending. And that's not an enjoyable experience for me, you know? Yeah. So there you go.
Well, can I add a category real quick?
Oh, it's right now. Yes.
It's right now. Well, only because I don't want to forget. I added best outfit. We've touched on this like on and off throughout this season, but I wasn't as intentional about it, mostly because I don't really see that many outfits that I'm like, oh, mind blown. But there was this outfit that Julia wore in episode 2. It's like a purple floral jacket with like a yellow or chartreuse, what you call that? It's hard to see colors. Chartreuse skirt. When she came on screen, it's this beautiful blazer that is not a print I normally would like. But when she came on screen, I gasped, and then I wrote it down in my notes. It's the only outfit other than one that BJ wore. And I didn't bring it up because it was such a like non sequitur. But BJ wore this one outfit that I think I had when I was 9. My grandmother gave it to me for Christmas, and I hated it. And she was wearing this outfit that reminded me of that. That's the only other outfit I called out this season. So I felt like I had to add a best outfit for Julia.
Well, you know, it's really unusual to see Julia in a print.
Yeah. Yeah, usually she's
solids.
And like sometimes like a color block moment. She really likes very organized solids too.
There was that one belt. They love to put her in like a whatever skirt in the cross belt.
Almost like a pencil skirt and the crisscross belts. Yeah. She wore it like every episode for season 3 or season 4 or something. And it made some appearances this season, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I do love a belted skirt, but they did that one a lot.
A lot. It became it was her signature belt.
It was a signature
accessory. Sorry, that was my addition.
Oh, no, I liked it. Thank you. I wish I had an outfit, but I did mention that in the Mary Jo episode that I liked her fashion show outfit. So there you go.
There you go.
Funniest moments up to 3 or you're zagging. So will you be sharing 1 or 7?
I have 4.
Ooh, love it.
I felt like it was close enough to 3. So, episode 1, it was mostly the delivery of this one. She says, I mean, what would possess me to risk everything I own on a game I don't even know how to play? I mean, have I been crazy for some time now, or did I just go insane after arriving here? And finally, and maybe most poignantly, where are my shoes? This was after the poker game, obviously, after everybody was drunk. Anthony's on the couch with a ice pack on his head. I just thought her delivery was so funny. That was a delightful line for me.
I like it.
How many do you have?
3 and a
you wanna-
observation.
Please enlighten me.
I suppose I can start with the observation. I was sort of alluding to this in the previous category, but I just think they really leaned into her as like the quote unquote straight man this season. And so she was more the reaction to others doing funny things around her. Or they chose to play up her vulnerable moments, getting older, going through menopause, emotions around the men in her life, la, 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 la. And I was just going to say that might be our loss when I look at her funny moments, which are some good physical comedy too, including like it was actually one of my funniest moments of the season, so I didn't include it here, but when she does the impression of a man making easy tasks difficult. So I thought that was really good. I'll go ahead and say too, Gone with the Whim, episode 21, because this is also physical comedy. When she slid down that banister as Scarlett.
Yes. That was glorious.
I think that was that actually in retrospect might be, even though that episode was not for me, might be like a top season, maybe a top series moment for her because it's so out of character and unexpected. And I really enjoyed that. What other funny moments did you have?
Well, I was going to say real quick to your observation, it's interesting that you think they leaned into her as the straight man. In previous seasons, who do you think that was?
Her.
It was her. It was her, right? Okay. It was just maybe amped up this season.
Like because, everybody else. Funhouse mirrored.
One of the criticisms I've seen of this season is that Julia, who's normally so dignified and even-keeled, was made so zany and engaged in such a wacky sort of way. So she
slid down a banister.
She slid down a banister. So I think that's a funny. I don't want to say disconnect because it's not a disconnect, but it's just a funny your perception versus this other perception that I'd been reading out there.
Right.
I also agree with you. Her physical humor was very funny this season. And one of the ones that I really loved was in episode 14, again, Wedding Redux, set to the background of Dondi and the Toussaints. So BJ kept saying, can you please stop calling them Dondi and the Toussaints because it sounds like a Motown group. But she was trying to pitch Anthony to let her do this wedding vow renewal thing, all while the other women were behind her, like doo-wopping and doing the dance, and she just gets right in there with them while she's talking. I thought it was glorious.
I liked all of the times where they tried to sing in that one, which is funny because like every other time, well, it was also them dancing. It was really the trouble, right?
Yeah, right. Right. And all the other
Just
times
don't.
we've seen it, just make it stop. And I'm not usually a singy person either. Like you break into song and that annoys me, but this was just it was with purpose. What?
The best part that no one else knows is that we test our audio before we start, and I definitely started with a song. So
And every time I'm like, no. Try something different, Selena. Give me a poem.
I sang a full song to you today at some point.
You
so
did.
How about that?
It's true.
Yeah. But you like that.
Lucky me. Add some dance moves and some jazzy dance moves, and maybe I'll get into it.
You know I'm going to throw in some dance moves. You think this is my first time? You want me to go ahead and go with my next one?
Do it.
Okay. So episode 19, The Woman Who Came to Sugarbaker's, Julia teaches Mrs. Beecham to waft into a room. And again, this might be one of those things where it was her doing it and it being so like sauntering or whatever, and then Mrs. Beecham's version so clunky, which is also me wafting into a room, by the way. Taken together, I thought was like in an episode I didn't particularly care for.
Yeah.
Was really funny. What else do you have?
I have in episode 2, Sex and the Single Woman. She was talking about the Halls, who are like routine clients of Sugarbaker's, and she says the Halls are regular paid in full customers who redecorate as often as they change their hair color. We don't have to like them. We don't have to respect them. Think of it as ministering to the needs of the taste impaired. And I thought it was early in the season, and it was enough to warrant a spot in my notes as a funniest line for her, because we've just heard over and over again about these Halls and how quirky they are. And it was interesting to hear Julia just finally call it like it was. Like, it's a guaranteed paycheck. Just go with it.
Just do what they want.
Just do it, man.
Money. That's right. It's witty. And I think that's true of Julia a lot too, is it's more witty lines than funny lines, and that they are different, it's a different kind of humor.
Yeah.
My last one is episode 11, Too Dumb to Date, when she says, I say, if a man can have his bimbo, Mary Jo can have her Dumbo. It's not very nice, but it did make me chuckle.
I forgot about that one. My last one was not actually something she directly said, but we got it replayed by Anthony. It was his retelling of her stance on the blight on humanity that is the answering machine. He says, you said they were crass and dehumanizing. If you wanted to talk to a machine, you'd whisper sweet nothings to your dirt devil. And it sounds just like Julia to say that. I think she's also had a diatribe on answering machines before, so we know this is a touchy point for her.
Yes, with Charlene, I believe.
I think that's right. Charlene was trying to get him to change the message or something.
Or like she was trying to sound sexy for a new boyfriend or
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do dirt devils still exist?
God, I hope so.
Huh.
You didn't just break something to me, did you? Dirt.
I haven't seen one in a really long time. Yeah, get on that, will you?
Yes, they still exist, Selena. Oh my gosh, what's wrong with you?
Maybe they just aren't red anymore. I've not seen one
definitely
in
red.
20 years.
Well, you haven't been to Walmart in 20 years.
Which is crazy because it means I haven't seen one since I was just a baby.
I do wonder, you're asking specifically about the hand vac, though, I'm sure. Yep, there they are. Walmart.com. The Dirt Devil Scorpion.
You're going to get me one for my birthday?
Yes. Is that the right answer? I don't know.
Yes. How much is this gag gift?
Yes. Fair point.
That's always something you really have to ask yourself with a gag gift. How much is it?
I'm like committed to the bit. Like when I commit to something, I really go all in. So I would be like $600 later realizing like it wasn't worth the bit, but I can't pull back. I've committed.
Right. Meanwhile, I would be like, let's go to lunch. You're like, $10? And I'm just kidding. You can't get lunch for $10. No. So that in itself is a joke. So we've got the cringiest, most obnoxious moments. What are yours?
I think I have 5.
You have 5? Well, let me go ahead and say off the top, and I'm just going to hand it over to you. I actually really don't have any.
Shut up.
Yeah, but
really?
here, talk. Yeah, but talk to me about it because I'll probably disagree with you.
Here we go. In episode 2, Sex and the Single Woman, the ladies have a conversation about the word horny, which Julia says she hates. So BJ asks her what she'd use instead. Well, out of curiosity, what word would you use? Well, I suppose sex-starved, salacious, lascivious, libidinously challenged. My question is, how is that better?
Yeah.
It was very cringy. It made me very uncomfortable.
At least 3 of those words I didn't care for at all.
Libidinously challenged?
Right. But do you see... Okay, I just want to say something really quickly. Now, this is going to be a little off topic, but not really.
Let's do it.
Because it is pertaining to Julia. And this is the Julia episode. You see how she acted about the word horny? Mm-hmm. And then I want you to revisit the play where she was like having a fill-up session through the window and fell asleep naked with him downstairs on the couch, knowing that they're coming into work the next day.
And this is the Designing Women play Selena and I went to see in Atlanta. And it's like Designing
Don't tell
Women
them.
after COVID. When you first said it, I was thinking about a previous episode about a play. And it got me thinking about that episode from last season, I think, where she and that lady went toe to toe in there. So I wanted to clarify for other people because I got lost.
They'll figure it out.
Very off character. They'll catch up eventually.
Go back and listen. No, I'm kidding. I really wish you could see my face right now because sometimes I'm afraid that like what you're hearing doesn't match my face. You
It
know what
doesn't
I'm saying?
translate. She's totally joking.
Yeah, totally joking. But I would love for you to go back and listen.
You can't
to
go
it.
back and listen. We went to go see that play. So listen, please.
We saw it twice.
Oh, Lord of mercy. We did, didn't we?
Once virtually and once live.
Oh.
Different actors. So there you go. Okay, you got 4 more.
Episode 3, Mary Jo versus the Terminator. Like I said, she just had lots of obnoxious lines this season. This one was pretty bad. As a matter of fact, please send the letter exactly as you wrote it, complete with awkward syntax and fractured sentences. Lord knows my name isn't on it. I won't be the one who's embarrassed. An a-hole thing to say to your friend.
Yeah, and also the fact that I didn't catch that makes me an a-hole.
Yeah, Julia, you're right.
That's exactly how I would talk crappily to my friend. Then I'd
That's what
kick
I'm
him in the shin.
saying. I'd push him in the forehead. Then we had episode 16. As much as I do not want to get involved in this, it seems clear that any hope of BJ's having a successful date will depend upon my intervention.
And then she set her up on a terrible date.
She set her up on a date with a man.
Like twice.
That's what I'm saying. It just felt very un-Julia.
Yeah.
Part 1 of the series finale. This line really bothered me. I don't think so, Mary Jo. Need I remind you that I am the Sugarbaker whose name is on the door? So this was when they were arguing over making decisions about the future of the business, and Julia was pulling rank.
Yeah.
And it really bothered me because Mary Jo has put so much into the business over the years. And at some point, I think they all were business partners anyway. And I don't remember any discussion about Julia being like a 90% owner, whereas everybody else was a 10% owner.
Yeah.
So that one really
I agree.
annoyed me.
I also think that Sugarbakers and Shively would sound really good.
It would. And it turns out there was a cut line in this one. Refreshing my memory. Mary Jo
Is this
said,
also something you found obnoxious? The cut line?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Oh, and may I remind you that it was I that started this business with you, and perhaps it should be Sugarbaker and Shively and Dauber.
Whoa.
There you go. You're
Look at
on to
that.
it, Selena.
And I was too lazy to look at the cut lines this season. So
Not too lazy, just cognizant of a good use of time versus a not good use of time. Then we
no one's ever accused me of that, but go on.
And then my last one is episode 17. So this has to do with the facepalm moment. Julia's complete refusal to believe that God was working through Mary Jo. It wasn't just surprise. It was like downright refusal to believe it. God working miracles through Mary Jo? I don't think so. And then, well, if God were going to choose someone to work through, he might pick someone who was extremely devout, someone whose entire life has been a shining example of faith and virtue. And who am I, Julia? Squeaky Fromm? And then she said, Mary Jo, do you really believe that of all the people in the whole world, God has picked you, little, the way she said that was particularly condescending, little Mary Jo Shively?
Oh, you're right. I forgot about that.
And then the
Probably
palm
because I
to the
refused to go
forehead.
back and watch the episode.
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah.
I got you, girl.
Yeah, no, that was really bad. And I would like to say that as someone who knows very little about the Bible, I was very much so under the impression that God often used people who you wouldn't expect because that would be a good lesson. Mary Magdalene springs to mind automatically. So,
I'm saying Julia don't know nothing.
yeah.
I've been waiting all season for this category with her, so thank you for that moment.
You're welcome.
had
I wanted you to have it all to yourself, too.
I was so frustrated because, like, Julia's always been a little bit like this. And I think
Yeah.
to that point you were making earlier about, we've talked about it this whole season. I don't want to belabor the point, but the Funhouse version. this was the really unfun Funhouse version of that particular aspect of her personality. And it was already something that triggered me a little bit. So when they really leaned into it this season, particularly watching her gang up on someone like Mary Jo, I was so irritated by that.
Yeah, that's obviously I'm all angry thinking about being called little.
Sorry. That's a trigger for you. It is a trigger for you as a little person. It should be.
As a little person.
As a Lilliputian.
Do you know how hard it is to lie on your license to say you're 5'2" when you're not quite 5'2"?
I imagine it's something akin to putting 125 pounds when you're not 125 pounds.
Do you think I'm 110?
It actually goes pretty quick. They don't verify.
I'm begging an officer of the law to try and say that. Do you think anyone has ever argued with a woman over the weight on her license? Do they want to live or do they want to die? That is what I've thought every time that I have looked someone at the DMV in the eye and said, 110. 98 pounds.
125, and I'm entertaining no questions about that.
Now I'm off to get a donut. You have anything to say about that?
It's so true.
Now I want a donut, so.
Fair point.
Can't have one. Okay. Most socially or culturally important plot. What you got?
I have two.
Me too. You think they're the same ones?
I don't know. Well, fine. Let's find out. I don't think so. So this one was a relatively minor plot point, but one that really resonated with me, especially like when I was taking my notes, I jotted this down. And I think even when I went back to look at it, because some it doesn't feel like it all the time, but I do go back at my notes and I don't say everything I wrote down. There's been a fair amount that I'm like, what were you thinking? What were you doing at 5 a.m. writing this down? But this one comes back to me. So it was in episode 5, Screaming Passages. It was a comment Julia made about women's health research. So BJ shared that she's had a lot of money and plans to spend it to keep her time from ever coming, AKA I'm going to spend a lot of money to keep from getting old. And Julia says, you do better directing your money toward research. These so-called experts know very precious little about women's health. They don't do diddly about women's health. Did you see that report about the effects of aspirin on heart attack? The study used no women. Heart disease is the #1 killer of women. So I did a super quick Googsy because this all feels very familiar to me. So I wanted to point out that she's the one woman she's talking about at the National Institutes of Health who does research on women. She said that because in 1993, Congress wrote an inclusion policy into federal law when passing some legislation related to NIH. The policy made a specific call to include women and quote, minorities in clinical research. It sounds like excluding women had little to do with potential negative outcomes during pregnancy, which is something that oftentimes gets floated. Like, we don't want to test it on women because what if the outcome is bad for the baby? Like, she doesn't know she's pregnant and it affects her baby. It had more to do with the cost of extending studies to include women. And then, of course, the unspoken deprioritization of women.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
That's not registering for you? No. All right, so back up. America hates women. But I think it resonated with me because I remember learning while I was pregnant that there's a lot about childbirth that we don't know, and certainly a lot about the impact of medication and vitamins and things during pregnancy because we just refuse to do this research. So one of the things that I thought was super fascinating was that, like, we don't even know what kicks off labor. The whole chain reaction that starts labor, we can't pinpoint what, like, hormone it is or what moment in the pregnancy kicks it off. Your body just sort of decides. Food. Right. Your body just sort of decides. Is it the spicy food? Is it the bouncing on a ball? We don't really know. That's fascinating to me. But I did find an article that said as recently as 2019, women accounted for roughly 40% of participants in clinical trials for 3 of the diseases that most affect women: cancer, cardiovascular disease, and psychiatric disorders, despite representing 51% of the U.S. population. And I'll link to that in the show notes. And it goes on to explain that the picture is, like, particularly bleak for those of color. So that one felt particularly relevant.
So good call out. And I do think I do really enjoy the way that this show slides that kind of information in.
Fascinating.
It's so important, and I gotta say something that's really sad. I'm surprised it's that high because the percentage that are women that are included
40% in
now.
trials.
And because I think I've heard, maybe I was listening to Armchair Expert or something, and they had somebody on, and they were talking about how woefully like low the amount of women in research was to this day and everything.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that just it really resonates, and I don't know. Again, like you said, it's awesome being a woman.
It just is.
Awesome.
It just is. But 40% is higher than whatever it was in 1993 that made them pass this bill, because it must have been close to zero.
That's really tough. So it's interesting. This would have been in Screaming Passages.
That's right.
Okay. So mine was also from Screaming Passages.
Okay.
This is episode 5. I just think it's really singular for a show anytime, but especially then, to talk about menopause. I imagine, that TV networks or streaming platforms then, even today, get antsy about anything that might alienate audiences. And sadly, these very natural things seem to fall into that category. That's unfortunate because TV can be, like we were just saying, it can be a catalyst for education and ensuring people don't feel alone. And this is really where Designing Women excelled. Even if they did seem to back off of those kinds of things in the latter seasons, I think about something like perimenopause, for instance, like for those who don't know, because I don't want to just assume everybody does, this is the stage that leads up to menopause and can last up to 10 years, and it can cause irregular periods, reduced fertility, and fluctuations in estrogen and progesterone levels. And I just feel like a lot of friends of mine, people that I know, wind up realizing that's what's been going on, and they just think they're like losing it, because it can cause a lot of shifts, like in your emotions and things like that as well. And then your body just doesn't feel like your body anymore.
It's like that thing that I make jokes about this a lot. I won't say everyone, but I make jokes about this a lot where I'll be like, I'm just so cranky this week. Like, I don't know what's going on. I must have not slept well last night. I must have not taken care of myself well, blah, blah, blah. Then come to find out it's PMS. And like, no matter how many times I go through this, I never process that's what it is. I do think that would be a useful area of research to expand, is looking at women's hormonal patterns. So I really liked my OBGYN. She was a nurse practitioner, so the practice I went to, I really liked them. But what she said to me was, I don't want to focus on your hormones because women's hormones shift all the time. So I could take your levels today, and tomorrow they could be so vastly different depending on where you are in your cycle that it might not tell us anything. And like, I didn't love that answer.
Right.
Because
so
it might
look closer at that.
But it might tell us something. You know what I mean? Like, it might tell me something today. So, I think we need to understand that. And I think that may be where we're headed next, because I do think perimenopause taking up such a segment of your life when you're not expecting it. Yeah.
Or up to 10 years. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a long time. So, like, we're not talking about it nearly enough. We're not talking about it openly enough. What are the medical advancements? I don't know anything about it. So it's going to be a real crash course for me, what can people trust, I think, is also really important. And so I found a couple of articles. I didn't want to necessarily go on for 25 minutes or anything about it like that, but a couple of articles for people who are interested. And there's also another article that we'll link to, and it talks about the grandmother hypothesis. I had just recently learned about this, like prior to seeing it in this article again, which is basically where older women are favored by evolution because they enhance human survival. So apparently there's only 2 mammals that go through menopause. It's us, and do you know the other one?
I'm thinking. No. Bears.
Whales.
That's what I said. I was going to say
this
sharks,
is our runner.
because I was thinking I was thinking of marine creatures, and as the word was coming to my mouth, I was like, yeah, that's not a mammal. Whales. That's what I said.
Whales.
Whales. Bear whales. Bear whales. That's what I
Bear
said.
whale. There's probably a bear whale out there somewhere.
Okay, hold on. Help me understand. So
Uh-huh. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not a
Women-
scientist, so let's see how far I can get.
older women are, what did you say?
They're
Biolog-
more favored by evolution because they enhance human survival. So I think if I'm
Oh.
recalling the article correctly, like they are able to pass down information and things to the next generations, even though they're not procreating anymore. So like they're the idea with other animals and other species is like they just die off once they're not reproducing anymore.
God bless.
And well, I guess I would be dead already because I never did my duty.
Well, you still have a chance to do your duty as an elder stateswoman.
No, okay. I thought you meant the other thing. I was like, I don't think so.
I mean, you can. I don't know. I don't know your business, Selena. But you could be an elder stateswoman. That is fascinating to me. And this is why I think I get so, in addition to being a woman, why I get so annoyed that women aren't more highly prized and valued. Because
Yes.
the other thing that's amazing is that like your genetic code is influenced as far back as your grandmother or your great grandmother, and the trauma that she endured is built into your genetic code.
Yes, like you are in your grandmother
The day she's born.
and you are there until your mother is born.
Yep.
And that is amazing.
That's wild, right?
Women are awesome. Mother Nature says so.
And everybody agrees with that when you talk to them individually. I mean, not every human on earth, but most people you talk to will say, my mom is the best. My grandma was the best. My aunt was amazing. My mom's best friend, my mom's podcast partner, she was incredible. She was such an amazing elder stateswoman. And they say that, but then they don't live it out.
Yeah.
What happens there? Love us.
That might be our next podcast. We'll just go full feminist. We can call the next one Feminazi, and I don't even care.
Oh, I thought you were going to go with elder stateswoman, but okay, yours is fine.
Oh, no, yours is better.
Certainly more appropriate.
Certainly, well, maybe more approachable.
But that episode, Screaming Passages, had a lot of layers.
It definitely did. And I'll be honest, it wasn't necessarily my favorite episode,
No.
but I really super duper admired it. And I admire the bravery. And it's weird. It's like, I was thinking back and I was like, Julia her performance was great. Those moments didn't ring funny for me though, because it was more scary for me.
Yes.
You know, I was like,
A glimpse into the future. A window into the next 10 to 20 years.
I'm like 10 to 20 years or last Tuesday. I don't know.
I just don't know
What,
why
you've
I was
never
so
cry
angry.
laughed before, Nikki Mays? Tell the truth and shame the devil. Do it right now. What was your other most important plot?
Possibly another feminist theme.
Not on my show.
I'm calling it the Karen concept. So is Julia the OG Karen? My evidence is her making the airport employee cry in episode 12, The Odyssey. So after the agent told her he was at the helpfulest point he could have been after a 14-hour shift, she responded, well, I have slept upright and slack-jawed in a lounge all night. This is not as impatient as I get. And then went on a proper rant after the airline went belly up, saying, listen to me, Agent Richard of Trans Global Airlines. I have been traveling, if you could call it that, for the last 17 hours. I am starved, I am stranded, and I am beyond tired. My back is twisted, my feet are killing me, I have not bathed. I have an extremely expensive ball gown I've been waiting for 12 long years to wear. Make no mistake about it, Agent Richard. I am going to Washington. If I have to kick off these shoes, claw my way across the counter, and connect your head permanently to that computer. You're flying me to Washington. If you don't have an airplane, I suggest you start flapping your wings. And then he cried. She made him cry.
Well, one could argue that one person's Karen is another person's hero.
That is true. That is true.
I tell you one thing, I won't be clipping that for social media. I don't need that kind of attack. I have like a grain of self-esteem left, and I need to hang on to it with two hands.
Well, you have nothing to do with any of this. That's all LBT and her crew.
LBT was barely around.
That's true. That's true.
For this one. So my second one was Nude, Julia, New York Morning. Again, just episode 15 in case people are trying to remember which one that is. So her relationship with her art teacher, Nigel, is a great example of like the power imbalance that exists and how that can be detrimental to the person with lesser position and lesser power. This is something we've talked about before on the show. But it's definitely something that's coming up here. I also thought the regression that we see with her was really interesting. This sudden inability to speak up for herself for much of the episode. This is the same woman that you just said what you said that she said at the counter at the airline. You know what I'm saying?
She said what she said.
She said what she said. But it feels like, I think there is a real truth to that, because I do think that happens to people who have been in, it may not be like the most standard definition of like an abuse, but it is a shade of abuse. And I think when people have been through those situations, they not every time, but they can have that regression. So I think building that into that moment is very helpful for a viewer who might be going through the same thing. And again, this is like her being able to take her power back, which I spoke to earlier. That's a really important thing for someone going through a similar situation, or could find themselves in a similar situation. I think that's a very important thing to be able to see, and be able to see like what's right and what's wrong, and how you can protect yourself when you've been put in an uncomfortable position like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good call.
So I really thought we were going to have overlapping ones. That's
exciting. How creative we are.
We're just doing it. You know what I'm saying?
Doing that thing.
So speaking of doing it, would you like to rate this thing?
Oh, yeah.
This lady?
Yes.
Sorry. I'm used to episodes still all this time later.
I went with airport grandstands as a nod to episode 12, The Odyssey. Yes. Mm-hmm. So I'm giving Julia 3 out of 5. And I'm looking at that now and wondering if that was overly generous. But she had enough cringy moments for me that this was a tough season. And it sort of fell apart a little bit for me in terms of like, I've always been able to see sort of the balance of Julia, that whole thing of like accepting people as they are, blah, blah, blah. You can't change them. So like knowing that she's opinionated, knowing that she, like we were joking about earlier, as long as it's her way, she's fine. Like there's a piece of that where you're like, oh, that's like lovely. I love that I love that for her, not for me, but I can live with it. But there was enough that was like not offsetting it, I guess, where it just left me not loving her this year. And just made for not a good watch, I guess is the bottom line. So 3 out of 5 airport grandstands.
Fair enough. So I gave it 3.8 out of 5. Fits of ragey, but also really sad, while maybe also happy, hormone-induced laugh cries, because, hey, we've all been there. Can't say that one 3 times fast, but that thing you just heard, that's the rating scale.
If I was like, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, I'd be like, no.
Missed it.
I think that she had some setbacks and uncertainties this season with relationships, but ultimately is like maybe still with Philip. She's not with him. There wasn't a breakup.
There's
episode,
no breakup.
So.
Yeah.
On the maybe front, it's also kind of nice that the show that she showed more of a sensitive, vulnerable side. I would argue that it takes a different kind of strength than walking into a room every time with guns blazing. She had some close calls with the business, and we've talked about that, but ultimately they figured it out by the end. So all in all, I think in terms of like how her character did, I think her character had a pretty good season. The mileage may vary on how I felt. Yeah. That would probably be a different score for me about how I felt about my final season with Julia. Do 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 boop.
So next episode, we're going to talk about, it'll be our series finale next episode. Then we're going to talk about Women of the House, the very short, I say very short, Delta Burke series that followed the end of Designing Women. In the meantime, we'd love everyone to follow along with us and engage. Instagram and Facebook at Sweet Tea and TV. We're on TikTok at Sweet Tea TV Pod. YouTube at Sweet Tea TV 7371. You can email us, sweetteatvpod@gmail.com. And our website is www.sweetteatv.com. Lots of ways you can support the show. You can tell your family and friends about us or rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. And then there is a Support Us tab on the website where you can go to support us.
You can rate us.
You can't, like, hi.
Just rate us.
Don't give us none of these 3.5 airport grandstands or semi-cry, laugh, breakdowns. No, we need a full-on 5.
Oh, maybe that's our problem. We just shouldn't always be rating everything 5s.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, so we just set it in people's brain. Mm-hmm. Yeah, do the rating.
I give it a 5.
Do the rating. It's helpful. But Thursday, before we get into any of those other things I just talked about, we're going to do an extra sugar on Dixie Carter's 1996 book, Trying to Get to Heaven, Opinions of a Tennessee Talca.
Well, you know what that means.
What does it mean, Selena?
It means we'll see you around the bend.
Bye.